this video, I'm going to show you what a Yellow Book report looks like. So if you're doing a governmental audit or maybe a nonprofit audit, sometimes you're subject to the Yellow Book. And yes, it really is yellow, as you can see. So the government auditing standards published by the Government Accountability Office requires that when you and I do an audit in accordance with the Yellow Book, we're going to issue a report. Now, I'm going to show you first the additional paragraph you add to the standard audit opinion that references the Yellow Book report, and then we're going to look at the Yellow Book report itself. And I'm going to explain what is being said in the Yellow Book report. So let's go to that example paragraph in the opinion. So the last paragraph in the standard audit opinion. So I'm not going to show you the whole opinion, but when we get to the end of the opinion for this audit, we would need this paragraph. And it's just saying, hey, this audit's been done in accordance with the government auditing standards, or what we call the Yellow Book. And then it's really saying there's two main focal points to this audit report that we'll look at in a moment. One's internal control and the other is compliance. So it's saying a separate report has been issued. We have also issued our report dated March 6, 2025 on these two things. Now, it doesn't say go look on page so-and-so for the Yellow Book. Maybe it should, but it's just saying that a separate report has been issued. So let's go take a look at that separate Yellow Book report. So here's the GAS or Yellow Book report, whatever you'd like to call it. This report has no findings. So there's no internal control findings, there's no compliance findings. But anyway, you can see what the standard wording looks like. So that paragraph in the opinion is referring back to this report. This report's usually one of the last things in a bound audit report when the Yellow Book is applicable. Now, if the Yellow Book's not applicable, you don't need that paragraph in the standard audit opinion, and you don't need this report. You should not include either if the Yellow Book is not relevant. So when is the Yellow Book relevant? Well, it's usually relevant when there's a grant agreement that requires the use of the Yellow Book. Also, sometimes you'll have state or local laws that require the use of the Yellow Book. If there's not a trigger, something that requires the Yellow Book, then it's not needed. All right, but if it is needed, here's a standard Yellow Book report. And, in the first paragraph, it's addressed to the governing body. Of course, you have a title for that Yellow Book report. And then it's saying, hey, we audited the financial statements, and it says what the opinion units are, governmental activities, business type, etc. And then it gives the date for that year end and the date of that audit opinion. Now, in this report, it does note that there was a separate component unit, this health department, that was audited by other auditors. And so if you have that situation, you have a component unit audited by other auditors, you'd need this additional language here. And then we get into the standard language for internal control. And it's just simply saying we plan this audit by looking at the internal controls, but we did not issue an opinion on the effectiveness of those internal controls. Now, even if you aren't doing a Yellow Book, you still have to do walkthroughs and whatnot to look at the controls. But when there's a Yellow Book requirement, you've got to include this report that says you looked at the internal controls in planning and performing the audit. and then you're going to say, we're not expressing an opinion on those controls. And then we give the definitions of internal control weaknesses. Those are in relation to a deficiency, a material weakness, and a significant deficiency. If you have a material weakness or significant deficiency, then either of those should be included, or a reference to that schedule of findings should occur here. But anyway, you need the definitions for material weakness and significant deficiency. And just real quickly, a material weakness is a weakness in controls that could potentially allow a material misstatement. A significant deficiency basically do the elected officials need to be aware of that control deficiency. So if it's not a material weakness and it's a lesser weakness, do the elected officials need to be aware of that deficiency? If they should be aware of that, then you'd include it as a significant deficiency. And then you'll have what I call an other deficiency, which is less than material or significant. If it's an other, you can just verbally communicate that and document those in your work papers. Okay, again, this report had no findings, so you don't see a reference here to 2025-001 as your first finding, for example. So if you had, say, 4 findings, internal control findings, you'd see a reference to 2025-001, 2025-002, etc. Okay, then we get into the other part of the Yellow Book report, which deals with compliance. So if a government has non-compliance with laws or regulations, you're going to address those here. And sometimes you'll have an internal control finding that relates to a compliance finding. So let's say that the government has spent far more money than they should have, far in excess of the budgeted amount. So the budget is the legal appropriation for spending. So if they've spent more than the budget, they've basically violated the law, and now you have non-compliance. Well, shouldn't there be a control or controls that would prevent the government from having this non-compliance? Obviously, the answer is yes. So you could have a finding where you have an internal control finding here in this section, and let's say it's 2025-001. You can use the same number here, 2025-001, and in that finding you can talk about it didn't have the right internal controls and it resulted in this non-compliance. In this example, they spent more money than what was appropriated. And then you see the purpose of this report language, and that, my friends, is what a Yellow Book report commonly looks like. If you are looking for example language, go to the Government Auditing Standards and Single Audit Guide, and you'll see examples of reports where there's findings for internal controls and non-compliance. So, go to that guide. I think you'll find that helpful. I actually keep a copy of those sample reports. I think there's 9 or 10. I keep a copy of those handy in case I need to find a different type of Yellow Book report. So sometimes you'll have an internal control finding and there's not there's no non-compliance. I should say they are in compliance with everything, but there's a control finding. That's one type of report. Another type of report might be there's non-compliance, but there's no internal control finding, or there might be internal control findings and non-compliance. or there might not be any of those. So look at that Government Auditing Standards Audit Guide from the AICPA, and you'll see these sample reports there. That'll help you come up with the appropriate language. So that's Yellow Book reports. Hope that helps. Until we meet again, take care and bye now.